Hello, welcome back to Showboys. My name is Mike, as always, joined with Pixel Nick. But tonight we have a very special guest, a friend of the show, returning guest, awesome, super huge Star Wars nerd, Tim from the
Rude.
Funny Science Fiction Popcast. Did I get it right?
You did.
Yeah,
The FSF Popcast. That is I.
there he is. But how you doing tonight, man?
Good. Yeah, we just got done with our live show about 15 minutes ago. I ran inside, had a quick bite to eat, zipped back out here, kissed my wife on the cheek. I'm like, love you. See you later. Okay, bye. I got to go talk nerd stuff.
Nick, we're keeping him from his family. What are we doing?
It's after
I'm okay
9.
with it.
Family should be asleep at this point.
I'm okay with it.
My wife has some friends over. My daughter's yapping on digital things. So
yeah,
and my son's off playing something. I think he's playing Destiny 2 at the moment. So
nice. I don't want to be a super creeper, but was that your son that just graduated?
it was.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Turned 22. I actually turned, or is it 23?
Father of the year.
23. I do the math. He's 23. Yeah, and he just graduated from college and moving to Ohio next weekend.
Hey, what part? I mean, I'm not there anymore,
but the Columbus area.
Okay,
nice.
that's where
Very cool.
So the Wolverines are invading Columbus.
Ooh.
That's right. I forgot that about you. We might move forward with no guests tonight. Just kidding. No, we're excited you're here. Yeah, it's always a blast getting to talk to you, especially about Star Wars.
Well, thank you.
You know, your power with Nick's power combined is just going to be a treat for anyone tuning in tonight. And like always, whenever you're on, or maybe Casey pops on, like I just get to sit back and listen to people who are way more knowledgeable about Star Wars talk about Star Wars. I just try to soak it up like a sponge.
Well, that's why I come here, because I can listen to Nick.
There you go. Okay, so Nick is actually going to deliver an Andor styled monologue for the next hour and 58 minutes, and Tim and I are just going to listen.
Yikes.
I'm okay with this. Let's do it.
I will just play a few select episodes from this season and I'll wrap.
There you go. But yeah, we're going to be obviously talking about the final chapter of Andor, which we have titled The Dawn of Rebellion. We're going to be going over episodes 10, 11, and 12, of course, as my favorite show. I can't speak for you guys, but my favorite Star Wars show has come to an end. It's been an emotional week for me, actually. Like, kind of joking, but kind of not. Like, I was sad. I watched this all 3 episodes Tuesday night. When it was over, I was like excited because it was awesome, but then I was immediately like, crap, now I don't get any more. There's no more Andor now. How did you feel, Nick?
I definitely echo your sentiment a little bit at the beginning of the week, maybe more so after 7, 8, 9. But once it was over, I just felt so relieved that it all landed the way it did. And then now watching Rogue One afterwards, feeling so much more better, if that's even possible, about that movie.
Right.
And I even watched about 20 minutes of A New Hope today.
Okay.
So yeah, just really rolling with it. So I don't know. I feel good. I feel relieved. I feel complete. I feel like that was a missing link in all of our lives for the whole rebellion era of Star Wars. I guess it's all there now. And now we can watch anytime we want. And they're just really amazing entries to the catalog.
True. Tim, I know you just talked about this for an hour on your show. But
I did. But that's okay. That means I have more time to talk about how amazing this series was. And I feel much the same way. So every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock, I have come out here to my office for the last month or so. And I've been like, I'm going out to my office because I want to be uninterrupted. Don't talk to me. My phone gets turned off. I don't, unless there's a fire in the house or someone is catastrophically injured, where mom can't take care of it, I need to be able to watch. I need to be able to watch Andor uninterrupted, because there's so much about this series I've enjoyed from season 1, and then the first couple episodes of season 2. I just knew that this was going to be special, and I was so excited for these last 3 episodes, and I was not prepared for how awesome they really were going to be, and B, the emotional journey that it would take me on, especially in the concluding moments of the episodes. So there's a lot there to unpack, but it's an amazing series. And I like what Nick said, because I did the same thing, honestly, at the end of the episode last night, or Tuesday night rather, when I got done watching it. I mean, it was close to midnight as it was, but I was like, and I had to get up for work the next morning. I'm like, I got to start Rogue One. I had to. It wasn't even a golly shucks, wouldn't it be fun to watch Rogue One again, boys? Let's sit down and do that. It was, I got to turn on Rogue One, and I got to turn on Rogue One right now. So
so in my old age, I could not stay up any later on Tuesday, but I did throw on Rogue One Wednesday night and watched it. That was the plan all along when we started this series on Showboys. Was we covered season 1 right into season 2, and then right after season 2 I was going to immediately watch Rogue One, just so I could have that complete what Nick called earlier in Discord, the Andor trilogy: season 1, season 2, and Rogue One. And man, holy cow, we were talking before you jumped in here, Tim, that now that we've seen the completion of Andor the series, Rogue One just hits so different. And like everything that we see Cassian do in Andor is viewed from a completely different lens. Like, it's crazy what this series did for that movie. And then I'll even throw out for Star Wars as a whole, like big picture is like immense, like so important, because what we have is like, a lot of Star Wars likes to focus on the Jedi and the Sith and they're like back and forth, right? Which is very important, obviously. But what this series does and Rogue One does is shows us, one, why a rebellion even was, quote unquote necessary, and shows like the normal people, the rebellion versus the Empire, aside that we haven't had elaborated on, but yeah, that's crazy. So good.
I liked how, for me personally, this series added connectivity to the rebellion. It added something where I want to sit down and watch Andor as a series and then go right into Rogue One, and it makes me want to go and do the original trilogy. I mean, I was that way at the end of Rogue One to begin with, where when we, what does this bring us? What did they bring us? Hope. They brought us hope. I sped home. I broke every speeding law there was in my county where I live, so that I could get home and watch. I had to see that, how it went from Rogue One to A New Hope, and and that's how I felt the other night. Is I had to like close that gap in my mind of how Andor goes to Rogue One, because it's just so beautifully done, so beautifully laid out as to how this series is written, the stories that is told, because it's not just good Star Wars. This is good television. This is just storytelling at its finest.
Yeah, and even there's just so many things that have so much more gravity behind them in Rogue One now. It does, so much of it just doesn't feel like, not that it was empty dialogue, but it is definitely not empty dialogue anymore. And just how well, obviously it's easy for them to do that with Rogue One, and line up the the dialogue between the show and Rogue One, because they're relatively in the same decade of creation. But I swear, did they change the opening crawl on A New Hope? Because the first paragraph like describes like in a battle against the Empire, and they stole the plans, and I'm like, literally just describes, like, the opening crawl literally describes that. I know that's the premise for what all that is that they made, but the way that it reads now, having watched Andor and Rogue One, it's just it just even hits harder.
Oh boy.
But I don't know. It fills in that gap because you're kind of, you watch the original trilogy and you're like, okay, yeah, all this stuff is happening. That's great. You watch the prequels and you're like, okay, this is how it fundamentally shifts. But it's like, how does this rebellion go from effectively like 0 to 100 in A New Hope, and go from like, what are we doing? We have these plans. Oh, a Death Star. Let's blow it up. It's like, okay, it makes that all so much more better in really every way.
I think the importance of what we have here, in addition to what Nick was saying there, is that we have the ability to have the story be set for us. They're setting the table, where other Star Wars. That's the beautiful thing about Star Wars. The best thing that Star Wars can do to answer questions is give us more Star Wars. That's the best thing that can happen, because this part of Star Wars informs that part of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I find that the more that I watch, it makes it so much better, because now we understand, like he was saying, when you first watch A New Hope, it's a great movie. It's fantastic. You're like, yay, these guys are getting together. They're sticking it to the man. Look at them go. And now it's not just this one random squad of people who decided that they'd had enough. You're seeing that there is connectivity all around the galaxy.
Yeah.
And this is something that has been growing for some time. Everybody's unhappy with Palpatine, unless they're, in the Imperial system. And even people inside of the Imperial system are unhappy with Palpatine and what's happening and how it's going on. And, because we talked about that in our show, just was that, you have a government system set up by a Sith. And what does a Sith want? More power, more control. They want, they deal in absolutes. So everybody that's underneath them, their underlings, are always vying for more power. It's not even a hunger for power. It's, like I said in our show, it's a lust for power. And we really see that get played out in Andor with Dedra Meero, and how she's pursuing everything so voraciously, because it's like I said, it's not a hunger, it's a lust for power. She feels that that's the only thing that's going to redeem her in anything that she does. But it's also, I love how they set this up so that it becomes the downfall of the Empire as well. That same lust and search for power. And that plays out in, because Star Wars is poetry. If we see it here, it plays out that same way again later, because we also see that in the sequel trilogies. There's a lust for power. And that's also what leads to the downfall of the First Order.
Yeah. And speaking of, the rankings of the Empire, to quote Qui-Gon, there's always a bigger fish. And one thing that watching Andor from beginning to like all the way to basically the end of A New Hope is it executes that there's always a bigger fish in the Empire's lineage, because the story starts off right in Andor with this agent Cyril, who works not for the Empire, works for something else. But above Cyril there is Dedra. Above Dedra there is Partagaz. Above Partagaz is Krennic, and and then Tarkin. And it's just crazy how it's almost like an exponential curve that you follow, because Andor starts off slow. And everyone will agree with me on that, because that's its biggest knock. Apparently, if you don't like Andor, it's slow. I'm sorry. But the first season, right, it is much slower than season 2. But even the first half of season 2 is paced way differently than the second half of season 2. And then by the time you're like in this intensity of everything coming to a head for Rogue One is just, I don't know. I guess I forgot. I don't know. I remember it every time. Rogue One is such a whiplash roller coaster, because I'm like, within 45 minutes, you get Jedha getting blown up by the Death Star within 45 minutes. And then you see the whole Edu attack. And then right after that, you're right on to the Scarif battle. So it has this, to me, a beautiful continuity of escalating energy from the very beginning of Andor all the way to the end of Rogue One. And watching A New Hope, like it's I always give credit to George where possible, but like he directed that appropriately at the beginning of New Hope when Vader steps on that ship. Like, why is this dude so mad? Like what is he doing? Like it explains all that. So watching that all, back to back, it just I really appreciated the continuity, but also the escalating rapidness. It's not like we watched the same pace from beginning to the end and got bored or saying it was too fast. It like gradually just gets faster and faster and faster and more intense. And there's just something really exciting about that, to where like I'm still on the edge of my seat every time I watch the Battle of Scarif. That'll never change.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely, because that's even the same within Andor. By the time we reach the end of season 1, the speed of the story has escalated exponentially. So yes, it is slow in the first couple little bit, but the way I've always liked to explain things with Star Wars, especially when even though we knew Cassian from the movie Rogue One, we really didn't know Cassian. We knew of him, but we didn't know anything about his background. So we had new places, new faces, new spaces. And when that happens, there has to be world building. And I thought Tony Gilroy did a really good job, a masterful job of building that world that Cassian believed in, loved, and fought for. And we take that from the end of season 1. We then move into season 2. It keeps up with that same pace, and we're at the end of season 2. We're almost to the breakneck speed of Rogue One, where Rogue One is throwing you back in your chair and saying, "Okay, buckle up, boys, because here we go. This is it." And I for everybody who complained about the speed of season 1, I just
go suck an egg.
There is that. Maybe even 2 eggs. But I don't think that they gave it enough time to, you had to get past. It's like a lot of things Star Wars, I find that, especially in series and especially in animated series, I always tell people, if you're going to watch Clone Wars, you got to get past season 1. Season 2 from then on out is amazing. Same thing with Rebels. You got to get past season 1, season 2, 3, 4, amazing. Andor, you got to get past the first couple episodes, and then the story really starts to click, really starts to make sense, because he had to use those first couple episodes to build the world that we were seeing that these guys were going to be fighting for, protecting, and why it was so valuable for him. It couldn't be just dropped in and, okay, here we are, and
Yeah. So, man, so much to unpack. So first, brilliant, genius filmmaking, or just like kind of stumbled onto something amazing in terms of George Lucas starting this whole saga at episode 4, literally in the middle of a story.
Yeah.
Like,
yes. It's yes to both.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, that, I mean, I don't know. I think he had a plan, right?
Well, there's a why. There's a why to why he did that.
Yeah, but like it just sets you up to be able to do what Tim said, like go back and fill in gaps, right? It kind of sets you up to be able to have that expanded universe. But one thing that I appreciate so much about this series and Rogue One is like oftentimes when you see people try to storytell in reverse to lead into something that already exists, oftentimes they'll drop the ball here or there, like accidentally retcon something that like was fundamental to the source material. And like Rogue One did A New Hope like amazing justice, and then these 2 seasons of Andor did Rogue One amazing justice. And like you guys said, like each one just, I mean, you could just throw them on like a hard drive and just let it play straight through, and it would just be like a 12-hour, or not 12-hour, I can't do math, but an extremely long, like continuous thing, right? It's just amazing, and I can't count high. So yeah, all that being said, Nick, I love what you brought up in one of our Discord conversations, and you briefly touched on it here, like the entire rebellion literally started because
Oh, yeah.
Cyril like couldn't wait for his boss to get back and like follow a simple like work
Yeah.
direction.
At least
that
that thread of
whole
it.
thing
Yeah.
snowballed into this. Like, if you just let that sink in for a moment, like that's kind of hilarious.
There's a reason why Cyril and Dedra were perfect for each other.
Yeah.
Honestly, they were both incredibly power hungry. They were both incredibly impetuous, unwilling to wait. Cyril couldn't wait for his boss, had to go do things his way. And as we see in series season 2 of Andor, Dedra also was the same way. She could not wait for things to happen. She went after Luthen when she shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
She, got herself in trouble for that. And because she was sloppy and impetuous, and because of that, nobody would listen to her. And so that's where we find out how, oh, hey, that's how the rebels found out about the Death Star, because she was sloppy and impetuous, didn't do her job the right way. And, one of her underlings had her code cylinder for what, like 2 years, he said?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So
yeah, well, that's a perfect tie-in to what we're actually like going to be reviewing tonight. I know, sorry, hey, it's 20 minutes in. Deal with it. We're just excited about the meta story here.
So good.
But yeah, man. Oh, what an end to Luthen. Like, just how episode 10 opens up, like Clea and his interaction, with the comm system going off. Lonnie's calling an emergency meeting. The conversation that Lonnie and Luthen have in the middle of like what is that, in front of the Senate? It's very like
Pretty close, yeah.
it's in the neighborhood, right? They're not meeting in elevator shafts,
like the little town square right in front of the Senate building, looks like.
Yeah. This isn't Bruce Wayne Luthen. This is just like, I don't care anymore. We're just gonna have this conversation out in the middle of town. Like, Nick, what'd you think of this, and then what leads to Luthen's demise?
Yeah, and I do want to note that these 3 episodes, not all what I expected. I don't know what I expected. I think I was expecting to see how they would build off of and maybe even top 8 and 9, but it turns out that you can't really top 8 and 9. That was like really the finale, I think, to the main story there of Andor. And then these 3 episodes are the continuity between there and Rogue One, obviously, because they have a much different pace completely.
It's the buttoning up.
Yeah, it's the buttoning up. But I like how they were still stylized a very specific way, because you have this episode that's all about really a very isolated, small occurrence where we just have a leak where Lonnie, happens to have 2 hours, and he's going through Dedra's files, who, like Tim said, has collected way more than she should have collected and kept. It's the same idea of storing like your work files on your personal computer or even on your desktop. Like keep that stuff in the cloud or on the network. But yeah, I love 10, and I ended up loving 11 and 12, obviously, but like for different reasons, and not for the reasons I thought I was going to, because they didn't really do anything crazy and grandiose, but it's also subtle and also important. And it kind of went back to the reason like the Andor people really like Andor, because there's just so much baked in nuance to like pick out. But I like how this whole episode kind of like flew together, right? Because we open with the panic of like, here's another Luthen's like a little bit going saw, like he's losing his mind a little bit. And he meets up with Lonnie Jung.
I like, well, we can call him Johnny. That's fine.
Johnny Jung.
Doesn't matter. He's dead. He's Lonnie, Johnny, whatever.
Yeah. It's Johnny Lung. You just flip the first.
Johnny Lung. There you go.
Lung.
Is that his
shot, so it counts.
It's his tombstone character.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I enjoy this episode, and I like that interaction that they had. And I don't know if I really in my mind was like, oh, he's gonna kill him, but he kills him, and I'm like, that totally makes sense. And I like when he meets with Clea, shortly thereafter on the steps, and like she's just repeating the keywords,
Yeah.
right, of like what he told. I thought that was so cool because I'm
Jedha,
like,
Kyber, Erso.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's also good. And they really throw a lot at you in this episode, and it's all about Luthen because shortly thereafter, he's destroying the equipment, and Dedra just knocks on the door, and I'm like, oh my god, like, this is insane. And I like how I like the practicalness that they put in Andor, because that is a bad cop mistake where you confront your perpetrator in that situation where they can kill themselves or get away or something can go wrong. Like, the proper protocol would be have a very tight control of that situation so things like that don't happen.
Yeah.
But she does not follow protocol because she has a lust for power, but maybe more so in this, like a lust for like winning, right? Like she wants to be the one that
she's got to solve this problem,
Yeah.
this
She wants the
specific
glory.
problem.
Yeah.
She wants the glory.
But Tim, she said she doesn't want the glory.
She lied.
She lied, and even her
She lied a lot.
Used
She'd
to be
never.
assistant called her out on that. She's like, that's
never.
why I got the job. The detail.
Yeah.
But I did not see him trying to kill himself, but it made sense. Did you guys see that coming? I didn't know
not really.
where that scene was going.
Yeah.
I love how I love the play on, like, she's bringing in like a thing to like sell to him, like a rare object.
Yeah.
It's
Right,
the freaking
yeah.
box from the first season. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh Lord. She's
That was a
kept
good
that in
play.
her desk for like 4 years now.
Yeah. Actually, I was not surprised that he killed himself. We on our show, one of the things we talked about was the biggest part about that scene to me was a couple things. Number one, just to go off of what Nick was saying, the whole bad cop thing, she did not plan for contingencies. The contingency of him killing himself because he's an antiquities dealer. And what's one of the biggest things that antiquity dealers deal with? Weapons of antiquity. So there's definitely going to be weapons in this room that he can do himself in with.
Yeah.
So considering where they were at, I was not entirely surprised because I knew that there was no way he was going to allow himself to be taken in.
Yeah.
However, I thought he was going to kill Dedra and not kill himself.
Yeah.
So
Or at least try, right?
Right. So I was a little surprised about that. We didn't talk about that so much, but what I was surprised about with these episodes is we really, in my opinion, and my producer John agreed with me that you really begin to see that, in my opinion, Clea was the one pulling the strings the whole time.
Yeah.
She's the one in charge. She was the boss, and Luthen was the face.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She was the mind. He was the face.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of impressive to me because one of the things I highlighted, you talked about, him pouring the stuff over the computer system. Sorry about that. One of the things that was interesting to me about that, if he was the brains of the operation, he would have never gone and opened the door.
Yeah. Right.
Because he was not done. He stopped.
Yeah.
And as soon as he stopped, I went, oh, this isn't going to end well. Because I just knew that something was going to happen because there was this air of unfinishedness, that's not a word, but there was this unfinished air to what was happening. And he just kind of walked away while it's smoking. And Dedra's like, what's going on back there? So,
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah. She let a crime, effectively a crime scene get destroyed, tampered with by having this conversation of like, I got you in the end. But also Luthen couldn't that's a good point, Tim. He could not resist himself to dangle himself in front of like what's been chasing him for 4 years, almost in the sense of like, not the same, but like when Andor says to Cyril, like, who are you? Like, it's it's kind of like Luthen being like, I know who you are, you know who I am.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
But
I'm not going to lie, I laughed out loud when Cassian said that to Cyril.
Dude,
who are you?
That goes down as like the biggest burn in all of Star Wars.
Who are you? Yeah.
You psychopath, go away.
Dude, and I love, like, we're not talking about those episodes, but I love how that completely ruins Cyril. Like, he literally, he's like, what do you mean? How do you? My life has been you for
it's been
how
you.
many
I have
years?
focused everything on you, and you have no clue who I am. Yeah.
Oh,
What was
so
left of Cyril at that point was completely just washed away.
Yeah, I feel bad for that guy. But yeah, man, the interaction with Dedra and Luthen was so great, and like, one, I love how when she whips out the I don't even remember what the Star Path unit, I think, right?
Good job.
He's just like, yeah, like he didn't try wiggling his way out of this. He's just like, well, okay.
crap.
I think at that point he knew she was being very direct and upfront with her game. So he was like,
but my favorite part of that is like she's going on and on, like having her "I got you" speech, and he is just like, I forget like the exact things he was saying, but like speaking over top of her, like, it doesn't matter, like the rebellion's already it's bigger than me. It's you can't stop
anymore,
this. Yeah.
Like, those are good lines. It's like, it's not even here anymore. It's everywhere.
And I just love the like delivery, because he's talking over her, but like almost like under his breath. I don't know. It was just that whole interaction was just so like masterfully done. But yeah, man, Clea, she definitely wears the pants. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. One of the other interesting things that producer John on our show brought up, and this was kind of like a mind me, because I didn't catch on to this. But in that episode, one of the things that I brought up was, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when Dedra and Luthen are walking around, there's a Rebels callback in that scene. There's a Calicori on the shelf. And so Hera Syndulla never had reclaimed her Calicori. So I'm kind of curious if that was hers, or if that was just a random Calicori that he happened to come across. I don't have an answer for that yet, but I will be researching that, because it's a little thing, but it's a really cool Easter egg if it is. But secondly, she asked him very specifically, are there any items in here of questionable provenance? And he's like, there's 2.
Yeah.
And he talks about the knife. John thinks that the other item of questionable heritage was Luthen himself, because he's not what he seems to be. Luthen wasn't his real name. It's not who he really was. Everything you see about him is fake.
Yeah. It's Grandma Luthen. So it's like fake Luthen.
Yeah.
Right. With the wig and everything.
Yes.
He's at the shop. Gotta wear the wig.
Yeah, Grandma Luthen is probably our favorite version of Luthen.
Grandma Luthen.
Yeah, that's shopkeeper Luthen with the wig and the.
I love Grandma Luthen. That's awesome.
Grandma Luthen's great. But another aspect of this episode that I didn't know I needed, but I'm very glad we got, is the backstory of Clea and Luthen. Super cool. So can one of you guys?
Good old fashioned terrorist Luthen, like just blowing stuff up for just the sake of it, just causing mayhem.
Sitting at the table, look at me.
He's been doing it for a while. Okay,
guys. And by the way, I'm fairly certain, and I think the internet agrees for the most part, is that was the bridge on Naboo where the funeral service for Padme took place. If you recall that scene at the end of Revenge of the Sith.
So someone walk us through like what old Luthen was doing, like when he meets Clea on the ship she's hiding. What's going on there?
I've seen it. I don't think at all indicate exactly what's going on there. I've seen people think that it's Alderaan fighting there. He definitely doesn't seem to be part of the Empire, I guess, fighting against, but I think there's a chance he could be fighting for the Empire there, and kind of like a Han Solo backstory kind of play, but I'm not sure. Tim, did you kind of get like a read on?
So my read on that, and I this is something I'm going to have, again, I need to do research on this because I need to verify exactly. I read a really interesting interview with Tony Gilroy talking about that backstory, and that this was definitely not Cassian's sister. But what I'm curious of is that the same planet when the Imperials came there and destroyed everything, at that age, because her and Cassian are about the same age. And up to this point, we thought Cassian was the only survivor because Marva took Cassian away. But did she survive because Luthen took her away? So that's kind of what I took from this, is that we're seeing two sides of the same story.
He said
just
it's not
from different
his sister,
halves.
though?
Correct.
Okay. Now, but when you're speaking there, though, now I'm starting to think could have easily been Imperial mercenaries, right? Kind of like a
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So not necessarily Imperial troops, but Imperial mercenaries hired by the Imperial Army to go in and just clean up, do whatever, just blow things all to smithereens. And so
because I was having a hard time tying him in those scenes to the Empire, because, well, I mean,
the Imperial dress would be different. It looks most like what we see. I don't know who mentioned it between the two of you, and I apologize, but the Imperial dress in that point looks more similar to what we see in the Solo story. With Han Solo. So it would kind of make sense to me that maybe that it's somewhere along those same style, but it's definitely not a stormtrooper battalion or anything along those lines. This is definitely some type of either Imperial mercenary or some level of Imperial officer. But then we had that one guy that comes in the ship looking for him, and he's definitely in some style of mercenary clothing. That's not Imperial issue garb that he's wearing. I did also think it was kind of interesting too that what we're seeing there is most likely, and this has been happening a lot with Star Wars, and I really do appreciate this, is that they've shown a better light on mental health issues, and we see Luthen having that's a panic attack.
Yeah.
What was happening in that ship? He's straight up having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And that's
Make it stop.
Yeah. And that's why I was also like, okay, I don't know if he's tied to the Empire, but also the way he's reacting to what they're doing doesn't seem like a normal reaction to like fighting bad guys, right?
Right.
Because it sounds, well, one, the sounds that are happening outside the ship sound like absolutely terrible, which any sound of war or active combat is going to sound terrible. But like, then on top of that, he's freaking out in the ship, like, make it stop. Like, they're doing something not good. So it's like, okay, so there's some gray area where this is falling.
Yeah, my thought is, and obviously we step into a completely different story with these flashbacks. We don't really get a Luthen backstory. We really just get a Luthen Clea backstory. Luthen has an entire different history that is completely unknown right now still.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it's one of two things, very opposite though, naturally. But I mean, he's either fighting for the Empire and he's very fed up with how that's going, right? From that mercenary life. And that's the flip where he's just like, screw this, like I'm fighting against them. Or he was fighting already against them in some sort of capacity. And he's just like, this isn't working. Like, I'm not just going to go die out in a field. I'd rather use my wits, subterfuge, and all of that to get the Empire. That was kind of my thinking of like the two ways that his panic attack was setting in. Like, it just was not working. Whatever was going on outside, it was not working for him.
Yeah.
He needed to be opposite of whatever that was, and quickly.
Yeah. So naturally, he decides to play like that paperclip trade-up game. Where I love seeing the progression of like he's could barely get 20 credits, and then the next time he's like getting 80 credits, and then the next time he's blown up some tanks on a bridge. And get to see the little his little shop's backstory really is what we got.
Yeah, and you also get like to see the ambition maybe, or maybe the genius of Clea kind of shine through, because she hustles that the bar the one shopkeeper harder than he was willing to do.
He was willing to walk.
Yeah, he was about to walk away, and she's like, no. Like, said what we
20.
said. Yeah,
no smile.
So that was awesome. And I saw somewhere, someone, I don't know if it was the Tony Gilroy. There's so many like excerpts of him talking about Andor, which I really love when a creator really sits down and talks at length, right, in an interview
For
about
sure.
a series. I don't know if it was that or maybe just someone else pointing this out, but the fact that Luthen is most afraid of Clea and like the idea of Clea, in that how dangerous she is because of the things that have happened to her, arguably because of the Empire, and like there's an untapped energy and rage there that can be used as a tool, and he clearly uses everyone's that same thing. The same thing with Cassian, he uses it as a toolkit, and he really kind of controls them and like molds them into, you know, the fighting force he sees as effective toward the end goal versus like these untapped radicals, right? And I think that was always I think Saw was the end, you know, the other lineage there, right? The untapped radical. Because even Luthen does an entire, you know, he never agreed with Saw's tactics. They overlap in areas, but like Luthen occupies the space between the Alliance, let's call them that, because like rebels are everywhere. Really, it's the Alliance versus like the partisans that were Saw.
Yeah.
And then Luthen just loved to occupy this space that tied it all together in his own way.
Yeah.
Clea was cold-blooded and calculated, and Saw's over there huffing paint, basically. So,
which when you watch Rogue One, and every time it takes a huff of that, it's like, he's not breathing. Like he's not trying to breathe.
That's Rhydonium.
Yeah. He's getting a fix, so that he's about to say something like
crazy
or whatever the mind reader thing is. I'm like, that's the first time he huffs it, and then he says it. And I'm like, oh, I see.
Dude,
I see how this is now.
I love
the truth.
I'm going into the crazy town.
Yeah, I love Saw's slow descent into like Alex Jones territory. Like,
Turn
also,
frogs gay. Anyway.
Yeah. We need that cut of that song. Someone get the AI machine rolling and do the Saw Gerrera Turn the Frogs Gay song.
Oh Jesus. Oh Gullet, turn the frogs gay. Anyway.
You're onto something, man. You really are onto something. No, but also poor Saw like has robot legs in Rogue One. I just realized, you know, in the watch through, it's like, what, man, this guy.
Yeah.
What the heck happened to him between Andor and Rogue One?
Mike's over here thinking, you know, he's messaged me in Discord, and he kind of has this old air about him, like it's 2016, 2015 Star Wars. Like Disney's like, oh, we need a Jyn Erso show. We need a Saw Gerrera show.
Yeah,
I think they just need one or the other, and they're just heavily in each other's story. I feel like a Jyn Erso backstory would be great with a lot of Saw features. I like Saw as a feature character.
Well, Jyn would make more sense because Saw disappears out of her life for a long time, so it would allow him to cameo in and out.
Yep.
Whereas Saw, I don't know that I like Saw as a side character. I don't know that I would like him as a main character because I can only handle so much crazy.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Vader. Like Vader can't be the main guy you're following around the whole time. He has to be the dude that shows up. That's like, oh, this is that kind of scene. Got it.
I will challenge that one. I will take a Vader series all day, every day of the week, where he's the main guy,
Vader, just like huffing and puffing around.
Yeah,
I want to see Vader just go absolute ham on some Jedis after Order 66. I am living for that. I mean, we're getting our Darth Maul series, and I'm ecstatic about that.
Yeah.
So hopefully, the somewhere out in the ether that is the Force, the Star Wars gods are listening and going, you know what? We need to make that happen. We gave him the hallway scene. We gave him that really cool cut scene in Obi-Wan, but let's watch him kill some Jedis.
Yeah, you're both speaking blasphemy, but it's okay. Not everyone can have the same appreciation for Saw that I do. But Nick, you say that, you know, in between chapters 3 and 4, I watched Sicario, and Saw could be the equivalent of Benicio del Toro's character in Sicario, where like that guy comes into frame, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to sit down. This is going to be wild.
I always thought of Scarface, you know, coming up with a big face full of cocaine and be like, hey, let's do this.
Yeah, poor Gullet. And then one thing about Rogue One, and not to get way off track, but like when he stands there and like the blast is coming where Jedha got destroyed, he just unhooks his Radonium like supply hose, and I'm like, why? Like,
Right.
like I'm done with this. Take me.
He almost goes, full Titanic on the front of it. I'm the king of the world, Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm the king of Rhydonium.
But
hey, that could be flammable. You just can never be too safe, Nick.
Oh, it definitely is flammable.
Oh, he's screwed anyway. It doesn't matter.
So the flashbacks, do they wrap in that episode? Do they continue in the hospital in 11 with the hospital sequence? I think they continue because
just
they're
a little bit. Yeah, there's still
they're
all
looping
just mesh
in
together
all the way to the point where she like unhooks him. I think because that's how they really space that out.
Right, because they have to. They're flashing back and then leaping forward, flashing back, leaping forward. So it creates a really nice patchwork of getting to the point of where we see her unhooking him. Mm-hmm. And even though she's as cold-blooded as she is, and she's as tactical as she is, you can see that she still has emotion and feeling for Luthen in that moment. Because, and we talked about this too, that it's an adopted situation, and I'm an adopted child. My dad is not my natural father, but he is my dad, and there's an attachment there because that's the person who raised me, and so even though they have, I think, more of a functional working relationship than a personal relationship, I still think there's a tremendous sense. Obviously, was a tremendous sense of loss because of what she had to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think later on, what kind of reinforced that a little bit more is like when she's held up in the safe house and like her disdain, right, to Cassian about going back to Yavin. She's like, oh, those people. Like she's totally on board with Luthen, whether it's like she's in Luthen's court in terms of like what he was doing, how right he was the whole time, not just when it's like convenient for these senators to like get together and be like, this is bad. And it's like, we've put everything out there. So just her resentment toward the entire like alliance and the way they run things and what they think of Luthen, like that's offensive to her because she's like, guys, literally this guy, not y'all for the past 10 years, this guy.
Right.
Yeah. It's that whole Batman, Bane conversation of you merely adopted the dark. I was born in it. Like Clea literally
Luthen is the dark.
Grew up as a rebel. But that is just really cool to see that. I loved the like secret agent Clea sneaking into the hospital.
Tony Gilroy,
right?
Did Bourne. He was like, we got to use the Bourne stuff in there, like
pushing around old like Star Wars ET through the hospital.
I'll be right back.
Sure.
Go for it. I love the hospital is such a cool set bit, whatever you want to call it, like sequence. It's great. I really liked it, and that's where I was like, we're spending a lot of time on this, but it's really important. I did not expect it to be like that, but like we really haven't seen Cassian, and
it's like an episode and a half into the final act here.
Which is
excuse me,
quite crazy. But it was just so cool, and then like the way Daedra's acting in there, and then her former assistant who actually owns that case comes in, and I don't know, the way that all flowed together and the way they pulled in all the characters that were intertwining there, and that's how we kind of get set up for the whole Daedra in timeout at the ISB.
Timeout.
Well, it's great because you see Clea, she employs the whole like tank mining of that flashback, in the hospital to create a diversion. But ultimately, like that all leads to Daedra being brought in and having a confrontation with Krennic, and that's where we learn like, oh yeah, they really did find the Death Star stuff. And the Empire knows, and they are not happy.
Right. And
it's about to go down.
Yeah, and it's like there's the inception of Krennic going insane over this falling apart. Partagas also being like, well, there goes the ISB. We were so close.
Yeah, dude just like literally pulls a Luthen in the office.
Yep.
Give me a moment to collect my thoughts. I
Got
think
it.
you lost your thoughts there. They're on the desk.
I like how I like how the one guy like knew what was about to happen. He just told the stormtroopers, just
He's
like,
like, no.
just chill. It's like
You hear the blast and the thud, and he's like, "Give it a minute."
Yeah. He still needs a minute.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting that episode though is the last time that we see Krennic in a position of authority.
Yes.
Because up to this point, he is in charge, he's in control, and then we start, like Nick said, it's the inception of everything starting to break down for him. We see Krennic, and I can't remember who Krennic was talking to. Maybe it was Partagas. I think it was about how this is taking you longer than it should have, and all these delays, and you can go tell your story to the Emperor, and next thing we know, he's catching a bolt to his own brain. And
yeah, because Krennic's there like trying to say like, you guys are idiots, you let this like get out. He's like, dude, it's a miracle we've kept it a secret this long. Like, you're building a ginormous Death Star. You've already torched like 3 planets in the process of doing this, like Geonosis glassed, Gorman done, Jedha bombed later, but there's another planet in there that I think bites the dust too. Like
Mandalore was glassed as well, but for different reasons.
But yeah, I mean, I totally get Pargas's position. It's like, dude, director Krennic, like, get out of my face. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? Like,
yeah.
So I forget what I was gonna say. But yeah, it's totally right. Where it's like we just get that little bit of Krennic and then Krennic off, and we know how he meets his demise. But it is crazy, from the optics of Imperial authority, like the breakdown here of just so much of their structure, because within days, the Death Star plans leak, Death Star plans leak. Partagas kills himself. Dedra goes to prison. Krennic's off running around trying to catch up. There's just like so many things, and like be Palpatine by the end of like New Hope. It's like, what's going on? Like, we've been fine for like 10 years, and all of a sudden, like, we're melting down. It's like the little pin, and it's Dedra's fault, I guess, or Ciro's fault, depending on
it's all Ciro's fault.
It's like you get one thing to poke the hole in the membrane, right? And that's Cyril.
Yeah.
And then you've got the thing that comes rushing through and blows it wide open. That's Dedra.
Mm-hmm.
And completely uncontrollable by that point. And then we really start to see the incompetence of the imperial form of government, because you see all the issues in Andor, and then you see how that carries on into Rogue One, and you start to realize that all this was under Krennic's control, and Krennic is also just as incompetent as the people that he was locking up, having killed everything else. He was just as much as to blame as any of them.
And this is what I was going to say. Episode 11 has this wonderful continuation theme of it happened in the first season, right? When Cyril and crew are on Ferrix, and they think they're like under attack from multiple fronts, but really like it was just like a few people. And that dude's like panic. He's like, we're under siege. The same thing happens here in the hospital episode afterwards, where they're like, we're thinking it's like 3 people. Then they're watching the footage like, holy crap, it's just her.
It's just her. Yeah.
And it's like, and then you watch Rogue One, it's like make 10 men feel like 100, right?
Yeah.
And that's this whole that continuing thing. And I'm like, oh, that's so awesome.
So it is a cool. Yeah.
They make the most of what they have. These rebels.
Yeah.
Rebel scum.
So where do we go from here, Nick?
Well, so episode 11 though.
A2SO hallway scene.
Yes, because that's where she kills.
So
she
good.
kills. Lets Luthen go in peace.
Yeah. She's a murderer, but it's okay.
So this is where she goes into hiding. She's a little panicked and freaked out because obviously Luthen's gone. It's all really kind of feeling closing in. She's like the only person that knows this thing.
She like breaks out the hidden, like much smaller communication device.
Yeah, it's like the backup one. And I like how the apartment is like really run down now, like these years later. And like the walls
it's been a while since anybody's been there.
Yeah. And like then she's like breaking down the walls, like getting the pieces out and everything. And she just sends like the Morse code off to Yavin. And thank goodness our boy there, you know, he's always listening for the call.
I love how Wilman's like side piece is like, someone trying to call you? Like you got some explaining to do, dude. Like what's
this buzzing under the bed?
Yeah, why is this secret phone you got, bro?
I'll tell you later.
Business.
Yeah, Wilman basically had a burner hiding under the bed.
Big old burner. But yeah, I mean, this is where we finally like get back to Cassian, like a whole halfway through this arc, and then here comes Cassian. And it's interesting to really think about the continuity of Cassian and the Rebel Alliance, especially with General what's his face that's always on him about something.
Yeah,
because he never really has followed any orders. Like I think he does not basically in the years in between, like he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But when we see him in the show, like he's breaking orders and he's doing what he feels is right.
Yeah.
So we see the him just basically say, yeah, no, I'm out of here again. Cause he did that in previous
well,
arc.
cause like they called together the council on Yavin, right? And they're like, he's like, look, like Luthen's calling, like we need to go see what's going on. Obviously not knowing Luthen is now dead. And like, man, I understand that the rebel, you know, there's all these splinter cells, and there's the Saws, there's the Luthens, and there's like the former senator led alliance, right? But like the disrespect on Luthen's name is just so crazy to me, because like Mon, I mean, I know he kind of like played you, but like ultimately he saved you. Like you were working with Luthen. You should know that, like, even though he's kind of a little, he's a wild card, and sometimes his tactics can be a little over the top, like ultimately he's been right, like every time. So that part I understand, but like made me mad as a fan. I'm just like, guys, just get it together. Like you gotta be on board with this, with Cass and wanting to go see what Luthen wants. But I also on the other side get it. But yeah, that's what leads to Cassian breaking orders, breaking the rules, and
I mean,
flying
it's
out.
tough because you have these people who have been in it, and we're talking about the soldiers, right? And then finally, right, the politicians get involved, and they want to carry over their same like processes and councils, and everyone has to agree, and everyone has an opinion. Mon and Cassian are really the only people that know Luthen, and everyone else just knows Luthen's like a shadowy Saw, for most part. So I get it, and you know, they want to be better, but you see the same thing in Rogue One, where they're like, we're not gonna do anything about this, we just give up. And then Jin's got to be like, rebellions are built on hope, and then they go and everyone's like, yeah, we're actually gonna fight.
Right.
Good thing for Admiral Raditz, he's the MVP right there. He's like, whole fleet, let's go. But yeah, we get Cassian and his boy from Narkina 5.
I always forget his name, but I always want to call him Milk. It's close enough to Milkshake, which is close enough to Milkchick, so I should remember this.
Yeah,
sorry, big Severance.
The good thing about Melchi is he brings all the boys to the yard.
That's right.
Also, just like Milkchick from Severance.
Yeah.
Just saying. Shout out choreography and whatever. Forget.
Lots of good
merriment
shots.
Yes.
Lots of good U-wing shots. And I like how Melchi's never been to Coruscant, so he's just little details like that. Like he's gawking out.
Yeah, he's looking out the window and he's like, oh,
whoa,
like flying over Vegas for the first time, you know?
It's like
Jeez.
Anakin when he first comes there in Phantom Menace. He's like, the whole city's a planet. Just those little details are always fun.
Yeah.
But this is a great like sequence, and this is only half of the sequence really. It's the whole setup where she's holed up there. What's his face, who used to Dedger's old assistant, right? He's like getting his Dedger on. He's like, we're gonna go bust the bad guys. Let's go get a tactical team together, and we're just gonna go right in there. Like we own the place. And I don't know, like Cassian just struts his stuff here. Like he just rolls in, like he don't care. And there's something about this sequence that really makes me feel like this is the start of this nonstop insanity that leads to his death in Rogue One. Because I'm like, dude, that was pretty intense, and that's probably one of the more intense things that like you've done in a little bit. But it's only going to get more intense from here. Like you're going to do that like 8 times in a row in the next like 3 days. There's just something about like this sequence that really felt like the beginning of this nonstop thing between Andor's like till Andor's death. I don't know. Did you guys kind of get that sense in terms of where it really kind of start? Like his life isn't going to stop after this.
Yeah. How? What's the time gap between Gorman and this, and then this and Rogue One?
1 year.
What about from this?
Well, then from this to Rogue One is like instant.
Okay. Then
when we see
I
him
agree.
at the end of the episode, you see K2 and him in the cockpit of the ship. They're on their way to go to Rogue One.
True.
The Ring of Caffeine where he kills the dude.
So
like, that's
I would totally agree with that then, because obviously Gorman was pretty rowdy, but there was that year gap. I always forget about because there were so many gaps this season. No, that's great. And then, dude, the K2 hallway, like slight horror, dude, so good. Using poor ISB guy as a meat shield.
That is the greatest thing ever right there. I watched that scene. I replayed it. I can't tell you how many times because I was like watching it. I was like, oh my God, he's using a human shield. And I was just.
Is the dweeb from the ISB that no one likes too. It's so good.
It was, they couldn't have picked a better person to actually catch the bolts, but I thought that was.
And the head tactical guy's like, you hang out here. We got this covered. No, you don't. This is the worst place to hang out because there's a droid.
I love it too because it's like the start of K2 like trying to blend in as an Imperial droid, but like not being able to, and then just being like, screw it.
Are you here with us? No. Why?
He just knows that he can get close, and then he can't handle it anymore and just smack somebody really hard.
I love it.
Side effect of his reprogramming, I guess.
Producer John and I were talking about this. That kick to the sternum of that dude into the elevator.
Yeah,
that dude's chest and spine had to be like mush because those KX droids were dangerous to begin. We saw that in a couple episodes back. When there was the whole slew of them there in Gorman and what they were able to do in Gorman. And now we see it with just one with K2, making sure that he was able to get back up to Cassian.
Yeah.
A fun K2 line in here that's a total throwaway, but he was like, I was in a parade once. Emperor was there. There was 200 KX units. I'm like, I can totally visualize that, and it's horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. I'm getting like killer like robot like K2 like KX units, but then like Nazis. Like it sounds horrible.
Oh yeah.
A Hitler parade or a North Korean military display.
It's a military display for sure. Yeah. I also loved the other line that I love from K2 in these was right after the hallway scene. Comes to the door. Cassian, I've cleared a path.
Yeah.
Yes, dude, you did,
K2's
my boy.
The best. K2 is seriously the best.
He's also like, I'm not good at staying on the ship. Like, no, no, you are not.
Yeah.
There are a lot of explosions for people trying to blend in.
Yeah. He always departs at the right time too. Because I realized that in Rogue One, I was like, Cassian tells him to leave, and then saw his people like jump out. And I was like, well, that's well timed. he gets to go back to the ship to save them. Flat armor.
Yeah, shush. Quit pointing those out.
Shush.
Nice. So then that takes us to
12.
Yeah, but see, Nick, the problem with the way we've been doing this, and I blame Disney, is they all just like blend together in my mind.
Well, when you watch Rogue One, you realize it's just 3 episodes of Andor.
Yeah,
and it's
really
the 3 planets I
that's
told
true.
you.
That's
It's Jedha, Edu, Scarif. Like
the same thing they've done in the Andor series. Everything's broken up into banks of 3.
Yep. And especially in this one, like they all do just blend together. Like, especially these 3 episodes, probably the most out of everything in the season.
I was going to say that these 3 episodes feel to me the most like a movie out of all of them.
Yes.
And that's what Gilroy wanted this to be, was basically 4 movies to feel like you could sit down and you could watch them in banks of 3 and feel like you're watching a movie. But I didn't really have that feeling until this bank of 3 episodes. And then I was like, yeah, definitely a movie.
8 and 9 did it for me because, well, no. Yeah, 8 and 9. 7, I was like not really too connected to 8 and 9. 8 and 9 were a package to me.
Agreed. I'll give you that one.
But then I was like, here's the like continuous 3 episode movie that like we've been waiting for. And
Yeah,
I think
for
that was the main delivery. Like I don't think it did anything too wildly over the top than 8 and 9, but on the delivery of it was just so perfect of these 3 episodes. It acts as that movie. And I think that's it. Like those, to me, that's the Andor trilogy. It's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, Rogue One. That's the trilogy.
We talked about this last week. Rogue -1.
Yeah.
This chapter was Rogue 0. And then Rogue One, of course.
Rogue One.
Yeah, I'll get with that.
But yeah, so we can keep talking about the happenings of episode 12, but I wanted to ask this before, but now that it's kind of come up in some sense right now, like we were all talking about like how excited / emotional / feeling complete that we got after finishing this chapter and the series as a whole and how it ties into Rogue One. Did you expect to have those feelings about this show and these characters, knowing that we already know what happens to them? We know the end of the story. Like, did you expect to feel this way after this series ended? I did not. Tim?
I think it has more to do with the additional characters that we gained from the series than the characters that we already knew. We got to learn more about Cassian, and that was cool. But you look at this series and the way the series ends with that final scene ending on Bix holding Cassian's baby,
little Poe.
Yeah, that's heartstrings right there. So,
and I love Gilroy talked about that in the interview. Like he was like, we needed to throw some hope in there. Because there's a lot of unhopeful things happening.
Because rebellions are built on hope.
Yep. Yeah. But I'm glad B2 got squared away.
We did get to see B2.
Yeah, he's just playing with the kids again. Like he's just a happy little droid. He doesn't need to be bothered with. But see, that's the thing. Here's the thing. Andor is all about like Cassian getting everything he cares about removed from his life. For their own sake, for his own sake, for his destiny, for their own sake. Because B is not R2D2. He is not K2. He's B. He's a nice little like house droid. He's ready to retire, and I'm glad he got that.
We have to say goodbye to our dear friend Tim, so he doesn't pull a.
I got to bail. We've got some really bad weather developing here at a rapid pace.
Survive.
So
thank you for stopping.
I'm sorry I got to bail, guys. Just on a quick parting note, and you guys discuss amongst yourselves. Andor is amazing. Rogue One is amazing. Please, if you haven't watched these shows, take the time to watch them. Even if you don't consider yourself a diehard Star Wars fan, you do not need to watch anything else in the Star Wars universe to understand what's happening in Andor and Rogue One. That's
Yep.
one of the most beautiful things about these shows is that they're beautifully told stories that can almost stand out on their own because of the lack of the Force, Jedis, lightsabers. It's just masterful storytelling.
Yeah.
So, and on
Now-
that note,
Go
come on.
pull your best kid Jin Erso cosplay and hide under that rock, bro.
Exactly. All right, bye. Hey, thanks,
See you
guys.
guys.
Thanks for having
See
me
ya.
on, and we'll catch you on the flippity flop and all that other kind of stuff.
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
see ya. And we'll definitely have links to the FSF podcast in the episode description afterwards, so you can go check out their stuff because their podcast is amazing. If you're into all the nerdy, geeky stuff, they talk about literally everything. They run the gamut, have cool interviews with actors, voice actors, directors, all that fun stuff. So always blessed to talk to Tim. But Nick, here we are.
Yeah,
Just
and
like Cassian losing something dear to us.
yeah, and I think that's the crazy thing about episode 12 is outside the beginning, right? That was the only like action sequence.
Mhm.
The rest of it's just like buttoning up the series, but at
Yeah.
the same time, completely setting up the roller coaster of Rogue One.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite moment, definitely of that episode, and I don't know, man, that'd be hard. I'm not gonna rank all my favorite moments, but it's honestly, and I love that they put this in there earlier in the season. The Force healer lady,
Mhm.
when she's looking at him, like he's crossing the tarmac, and he looks at her, and she just like stops what she's doing, looks at him. I'm like, dang, like
Yeah.
he knows in that moment. I think like one, he's like truly free. I think finally of Bix, right? He's free of all of his kind of weights in his life, the things that were steering him away from his destiny. And just in that moment, it's just like I think he knew that like he's going to do the thing that he was kind of meant to do. And like she was looking at probably a dead man. She knew, she was like, he's about to go do the thing that he's
Yeah.
destined to do. That was my favorite moment. And obviously that's the walking on the tarmac to literally go to caffeine
Yeah.
to go shoot dude in Rogue One right promptly.
Yeah.
Good moment.
I don't know if I could pick a moment.
At least from that episode. That's what really
yeah.
did it for me. I mean, obviously the whole Bix thing is like really nice and moving, but I was like, there it is. It's like Cassian, Andor.
Yeah, and honestly, like, you know, I said this is now the third time I've talked about being emotional watching the end of this and Rogue One. Man, it's just his theme playing under during that moment.
Yeah.
Because like this, oh man, dude, his theme
Music
song
gets you, dude.
is so good, and it's so brilliantly written, and the way it cascades and all of that stuff just like lines up totally perfectly with how the story plays out. And just the melody is haunting and beautiful at the same time, and that's playing and slowly building, and they make that eye contact, and
Yeah.
they both are kind of like non-verbally agreeing like this is it. And I think in a way like Cassian also knows like this is it, like this is it.
Yeah.
And she, I think, knows that too. But yeah, it's a good moment. And
it's just crazy the continuity between even these 3 episodes in Rogue One. Like it's just nuts because
yeah,
even because in this episode, like even his, the general guy that's always barking orders at him, and he's coming up to Cassie. He's like, "Hey, what's his face on Kafrene? He like really needs to meet." And he's like, and Cassian's like, "Right now, like, is that what we need to be doing?" And it's just cool because they drop the hint where even they're becoming aware. It's like there's a lot of things going on right now that can't just be mere coincidence that we need to hunt down. And then that same sentiment is held by Saw, because when Jin shows up, he's like, on this day, he's like, I knew I'd see you again, but like, of course it's like today. Today's the day you walk back into my life. The pilots, like he can like, and I'm just like, that's so cool because that echoes like Saw's thing. He's like, why is today the day?
Yeah. Do they mention Bodhi in this episode? They meant not obviously not by name, but do they mention the pilot?
No, so that's the thing, and that's what I said to you in Discord. That kind of Cyril wasn't completely the undermining of the whole thing, right?
Right.
There's two collisions here. We have Lonnie, who reads Dedra's files and tells Luthen about the Death Star or a weapon.
Yeah.
We have Galen, who separately will have always told Bodhi, like, here's a message to get to Jin.
That's right. Galen tells him. Yeah.
Right. And that had a little bit more detail in it, right? Because they're very carefully in Andor, right? We only know like weapon, Kyber, Erso, right? Very, very, very tight. Whereas at least the dude he meets on Caffeine, he's like a planet killer. So like that's why Cassian is still like, tell me about the weapon. Like, what is it? Like they still don't know yet. And then that's the guy who's like planet killer, big one.
So how did he know about it already? Did that guy on Caffeine talk to Bodhi? Or like I know it all makes sense, but for some reason I'm drawing a blank of like how Andor is told in episode 12 that he needs to go talk to that guy on Caffeine, and how that guy learned about the Death Star.
That guy learned of it through, I think, just his network, because remember on Jedha, they're looking for Bodhi. Like he didn't quietly just like sneak off to go tell Saw for some reason. I forget exactly why, but like that was a big to do. So that was more of like that part of the galaxy, like talking about this thing that's happening. This pilot that defected and is saying all this stuff. Meanwhile, Saw is also like actively like terrorizing the Empire in Jedha. So I think it's just like a collision of a lot of things there.
Yeah.
That they just stack up. But I like how they're separate though, because they don't really tell us why. Like Cassian rolls up the Caffeine. Like Cassian kind of knows half the story. He gets the other half of it from that dude. But really just confirming information. He doesn't learn too much new. He just confirms some stuff. Because that guy doesn't say anything unique. He says all the stuff he knows. He's like Erso? Because that guy says Galen Erso, like pilot. And he's like, Erso? Like, say it again. Like, are you saying all the same words that I just heard?
Yeah. Jedha, Erso, Kyber.
Right. So it's like that dude confirmed a bunch of things for Andor, but plus like his general guy. So that's when he goes back and he's like, dude, he knows all the same stuff we were told from a completely different like source. That's how they were able to be like, this is a big deal.
Dude, no, go ahead. You're still in the middle of the thought.
And that's why I think now it makes sense that there has to be like an implied time jump between Caffeine and K2 knocking Jin on her ass when they rescue her. I think there's a time gap there of at least
congratulations, you've been rescued.
Because I don't think Andor would have just like sent K2 on his own. Like I think he was with him. They went to get Jin Erso. They likely already knew where she was, because she was a Saw like person. So part of their little intel network, I'm sure they were aware of who she was and where she was. So they went and picked her up because they're like, oh, Jin Erso used to run with Saw. Her day, and then they're piecing together. So when I watched it that time, I was like, there's a little bit of a time jump there that's unsaid, but there has to be one, because there's no way they go from Caffeine to picking up Jin, and then next thing you know, Jin's in front of like Mon Mothma and everyone, and she's like getting interrogated.
Now again, because the bleed through, because also watching Rogue One, was it in episode 12 where we get the cool Mon Saw hologram chat?
Yes,
that was cool.
Yes.
because it reminded me a lot of Mon and Saw's hologram chat in Rebels.
I think it was intended to be like
That wasn't the same chat, right?
they had several chats because that happens in 2 episodes in Rebels. They have a chat over
Yeah.
the HoloNet, and then I think this is just like another one, or they just kind of live
Beefed up
action
that one a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, I love that because I'm like, oh, there's Mon talking.
Yeah.
It's all a thing.
Dude, I could I knew obviously I know that's Mon, but like I could barely recognize him. Like, did they recast her? I mean, obviously
she's
no, they
Beatrice
didn't.
now.
But I'm
Yeah.
just like, holy cow, she's like a completely different person.
She's eating with the soldiers, which is
Yeah,
cool.
just hanging out
with their cousin. Removed. It's a cool vibe, but at the same time, like I don't know why Bale's got to walk around with his fancy cloak and stuff. I think
Yeah, his little like pocket protector holding those little 3 pins on his cloak.
I don't know if he's like. I feel like he's still like double life in it. He spends a lot of time there, but he still like makes incursions back to Alderaan and like stuff like that. I'd have to think more on that because then there's also like it's crazy to me though. I was watching Rogue One and I'm like, so Leia is on General Raditz's ship inside the Tantive 4 that's docked.
Just chilling.
Yeah, like Raditz like, all right, we're going. And she's like, can I hitch a ride real quick? I'm trying like, I'm like, how does that all whatever?
Yeah. Don't think too much. Don't ruin the connection.
Yeah, I mean, it overall strengthens it, man, like I told you, when Cassian and Jin like go at it after Edu and like her dad dying, he like delivers the same like Luthen thing, not identical, which I love. It's always like variations of what he is, of what it was. And he's like, you're not the only one who's lost everything. And like he says that, I'm like, oh man, like girl, don't go
And
there.
that
like,
means so much more now.
yeah.
And I think so like
and when he's like, I've been in this fight since I was 6, I'm like, yes, you have. Yeah, because your homeworld got invaded by the Empire that strip mined it and killed all the adults.
Yeah, and I think that's why like it carried that emotion for me because I'm like, oh wow, that whole speech or monologue there like actually has a lot of weight to it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's where like what I said earlier, like Cassian is tired.
Yes.
Like at that point, man, he is just like he's not quite. I mean, obviously, no one's on the Saw descent ever, but he's getting closer to the Luthen at the end of this series type, where he's just like the game's up, dude. Like I'm done. Like carrying in the sense of like tiptoeing around these like fragile things. Like it's all or nothing, and it's been everything for me. And like at this point, I don't care. I just want to get the job done.
And not that it wasn't believable all these years with Rogue One, because we're talking about these characters who very selflessly like went into Scarif, like a suicide mission to do a thing all on hope. None of that was guaranteed, and they're just gonna find some way to do it. But like it kind of all of Andor like explains why at least Cassian and a lot of the people that were with him, the rebels, like were so willing to like go all the way and risk everything. The only person that feels out of place is Jin, but it helps knowing now, almost 10 years later since Rogue One, about Saw and everything Saw's done. So when you know that Jin used to run with Saw, that explains a lot about Jin. And then the galvanizing thing is that literally her father, who she hasn't seen in like 16 years, is like, my girl, this is everything. Like my legacy, this is how we're going to redeem all of it.
Yeah.
That would probably galvanize anyone, especially knowing that she used to be in it with Saw. Like she used to fight the fight. Yeah. So when Dad shows up on a hologram and is like, yo, this is me. I died for this. Can you carry the torch? She's like, heck yeah. And that kind of fills in the gap where it's like, why do we have this like heroic Jin out of kind of like nowhere? But that's where a series would just like back that up just a little bit more. But other than that, like,
it's like I didn't know I wanted Cassian's backstory, but man, I sure am glad we got it. And so like I probably would, if the same people were involved, I probably would feel the exact same way about Jin.
Yeah.
But the cool thing, now that this is turning into a Rogue One episode,
well,
the cool thing about Galen though and Jin is like they knew Saw before like that happened, right? And Galen very much was not like up for working for the Empire. Like he tried to disassociate himself from that once before, and
well, that's a good
so
question. Like, did
like
he know him before the Empire, or did he know him and that's how he got away from the Empire, kind of thing?
That part to me is irrelevant.
Yeah.
My point is just that like it's not like Galen had this heel turn in the middle of working on the Death Star, where it's like why on earth would he just randomly do this and then Jin just be like, yeah. It's like no, like he was anti-Empire before, like you know, and we see that obviously in the very beginning of the movie, but like a small detail like that goes so far in making the rest of it totally believable.
And how much is Jin like Cassian at the beginning of Andor? Like, she's totally out for herself, like isn't part of this big thing, but really quickly is. But it helps knowing that she once was on the Saw side. So like that's what I was just thinking about constantly, because I'm like, well, technically we have a way more context about a lot of these characters now.
Yeah.
But this goes back to what I was saying about A New Hope and like George's genius to say how he directed that. Like, here's Darth Vader, and he's like pissed. He's on the ship. He's looking for these things. Like, why? Because there's a bunch of reasons why, but this is how it needs to be acted. It's not like they just show up and they're all kind of like lame ducks and there's like, oh, give me the plans. We're, it's not boring. It was still shot, directed, and acted in a way that like perfectly matches up with the tone of all this other stuff. And that's how Jin and Cassian play out in Rogue One now. Like all of that tonally makes sense. And obviously it's I guess easy to retro that, but the fact that they were able to start that up
like that,
right? And it's like, one thing people had an issue when Rogue One first came out was, well, now A New Hope feels really kind of dated and like slow.
Well, it's only like, at the time,
right,
40 years old. So
I just think the continuity is just like really there. It's insane how well it's done.
And like that type of storytelling that George did in A New Hope, where you literally are just plopped in the middle of a story. And there the only exposition you get is the screen crawl at the beginning, and then you're just bam right in the middle of a conflict that is very important and you don't really understand why, and then slowly the pieces start to fall into place as the movie plays out. And then
Rogue One is the first paragraph of the screen crawl. Like that's Rogue One. They gave us Rogue One, and then Rogue One gave us Andor, and they were like, well, here's 8 movies about this dude.
So 2 things. One, I'm finding that type of storytelling has been long missing for decades and decades. People just don't tell stories like that, and I think it's a lost art. And I think stories that are told like that are so much more engaging for the consumer, because like you have to engage with it as the consumer, because you're trying to figure out like what the heck's going on. And so like you're paying attention and you're like listening to the conversations and like looking at every detail, because you're like, why are things the way they are? I don't understand. Whereas like if you spend the first act of a movie of just acting out exposition, it's like I find it hard to like continue to care because it's like a lazy viewing or even video game like lazy playing experience because like I don't have to figure the things out, you know. And all that to be said, the game we're playing for the Showboys Game Clubs, shameless plug, Expedition 33, that game does that. It tells the story in that way. It just plops you in the middle of this society with no explanation, and you're just like along for the ride. And as the game progresses, you know, the layers of the onion start to get peeled back, and you start to learn like, oh, that's why this is happening, or you know. And just that type of storytelling is a type that I very much appreciate and wish that we had more of. And then all that made me forget what the other thing I wanted to say was, so maybe it'll pop up in my mind as we continue.
Yeah, and I'm just obsessed with continuity here, but also maybe so to the detriment of like the quote unquote Skywalker saga, right? All the Force stuff, right? The problem with that is it is just obsessively following like this lineage of the Skywalkers, right? From episode 1 all the way to episode 9. And this whole very, it's all about the characters. And then the galaxy's just kind of, you know, bending to their wills as they kind of navigate their own personal problems, right? Whereas Andor and Rogue One really kind of reorient the entire story away from them in a healthy way, because what you're able to do now is now watch A New Hope and potentially the whole next trilogy not through the lens of like the Skywalkers and that whole drama, but from the lens of like all these characters who've spent a lot of time with, but have also died. And what continues on isn't anything about them. It's what they were doing in the story that they were progressing.
It's what they're fighting for.
Yeah, it's like it's this thread of what Luthen started, right? What technically started all the way in episode like 3 when the Senders were like, this is not good. Palpatine has got way too much power, right?
Yeah, the movie episode 3.
Yeah, sorry. Revenge of the Sith. So I just really like that because we're able to just follow this story and have all these characters die, but like you're still heavily invested, and it doesn't hurt the story that a character dies. It like helps it. Like by the end of Rogue One, you're like, whoa, like there's some serious stuff going on here. So I don't know. I mean, like you said, I thought of that off of because you were saying like storytelling. Like part of the problem with the Skywalker saga is it's telling a story of the Skywalkers. Whereas like this is telling a much more detailed, important story.
And
one that it doesn't rely on characters to like be good, right? That's probably the same problem with like a lot of the Marvel stuff is it's all reliant on the characters and not like what's happening. It doesn't matter what's happening. Iron Man's here.
Exactly. Just to update, Tim is fine. Good. No tornadoes blowing him away. But you know, still storming pretty rowdy out there, but he's good, messaging us in Discord. But yeah, dude, and one thing that I think gets lost in the Jedi Sith aspect of Star Wars is like that's kind of like not a large population,
right?
You know, like that's a very minority group of people in this galaxy, in this universe.
Yeah, I mean, kind of imagine it if only like the Cardinals like had lightsabers and can use the Force in the Catholic Church. Like how many of us like regularly hang out with Cardinals, right?
Yeah, exactly. Never, not many.
It's kind of like that tier of society where it's like they're like what fraction of a percent like of like normal people don't know like
Yeah.
what they're doing at the Vatican all the time and everywhere.
And those stories, though, are still very interesting, and it is a part of the grand story, right? So those movies obviously have their place and their significance in the
Oh yeah,
universe.
for sure.
But what I love about removing that, you kind of saw it in Mandalorian a little bit, but like also not the point I'm about to make is not made in Mandalorian at all. But when you remove the Jedi and Sith and the Force and the lightsabers and superpowers and magic and all that, like we have this human story that makes up the vast majority of the galaxy, right? And things like stormtroopers are scary.
Right.
Because like though on the other side of the Star Wars film universe, like they're laughable, they suck, they're easily dispatched. Well, that's because they're going up against freaking Jedi. Like,
I mean, every time you see a stormtrooper in Andor, because we're used to seeing like officers and agents and stuff like that, you're like, oh, like those dudes are lethal. Like the stormtroopers are business. That's why when they show up
with
in the
like
Square,
the general population, like
and
that is bad news.
And like when you see them running through the Senate and they're arresting senators, you're like, yeah, that's terrifying. Like that's a bad look. So no, I totally agree.
So like, with Mandalorian, that doesn't apply because he's like literally freaking a Mandalorian bounty hunter, like Ace Combat, right?
Well, here's the issue with the Mandalorian in comparison to Andor.
Mm-hmm.
The Mandalorian, and this is same thing evidence when Luke shows up in Mandalorian. Luke at all has no impact or care. Like nothing that's going on in the Mandalorian impacts him and his story at all.
Right.
He's just a cameo that shows up and he's like, oh, look, Force Baby that was calling out to me. Little side mission for me.
Yeah.
Right. Andor threads like this needle threads that the needle that is Andor threads the entire like happenings of the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. All that happens because of all this stuff that happens in Andor and Rogue One. Because Bail doesn't have to be like, go get Leia to go do a thing and find Obi-Wan. And ultimately Tantive 5 isn't over Tatooine being chased by Vader. And all that happens because of this.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a really big argument why this is so much better storytelling than even Mandalorian. Mandalorian is good for what it is, but like nothing that goes on in Mandalorian, it just exists kind of like parallel to all the other stories that are happening.
Yeah. And the events of this like are the direct cause that bring Vader and Luke into the picture, right?
Yep.
You like Vader at the end of Rogue One is called in to deal with this problem of the rebels like having the plans to the Death Star, and then what's the rebels' response to that? Well, eventually Luke Skywalker, and then the Jedi and Sith are at each other. Like that whole aspect of Star Wars and that millennia long conflict is now brought into the picture, and it's like I don't think this is an issue, but I don't want it to be an issue of like undermining the importance of these three, like the first two seasons or the 2 seasons of Andor and Rogue One, like so important.
Yeah.
When you really like zoom out and look at it, but
because I mean even episode 8, Gorman, the whole Gorman massacre, that's not needed. It really just sets up why episode 9 happens, which ultimately explains how Mon and then like Yavin formally really get underway. So it's hard to say like what the inception of like it all is, but it all just builds toward.
Yeah, it's just that beautiful like snowball rolling down the mountain image.
Because Rogue One ends and like you're introduced to Darth Vader, right there at the end.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
I see some buzz on the internet where they're like, "Dang, Andor should have just end with Cassian and Jin going out in the blast. Like that should be the final shot. If you were to just say the Andor story, it ends when Cassian dies with Jin on the beach, right?
Mhm.
Then we go to Darth Vader.
But that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
not us, like you just said 10 minutes ago. It's not about the characters. It's not
Right.
about Cassian.
So it's
So
like
when his story ends, that's
they
not the
beam
end.
they beam the plans. We're following the plans. That's what we're following the whole time.
Yeah,
Is like
yeah.
what they're building, the ultimate threat to the galaxy. They beam these plans up, so it's like they die. And I don't think the camera moves like this, but we essentially just like pan up to just above where they die,
Mhm.
and then Darth Vader is now ripping through a hallway, like trying to get the disc.
Mhm. I
And then
love
all
how
of a
they're like burning it onto the
yeah,
thing. Like, come on, burn faster.
yeah, I love the loading. It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
consistent. But then so then you're introduced to Darth Vader for the first time, and then you see him and you see Leia in there. So all of a sudden you get introduced at the very end of Rogue One, these two characters that are a different tier, but that doesn't matter because we're still following the same story.
Mhm.
And now the story is just going to get taken over by effectively the next level. So it also has this very nice like power scale
Yeah,
with
yeah.
it, where you're not sitting around in Rogue One, you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Or like in Andor, you're like, why are they so powerful? And you have that issue all the time when you're focused on Force users, because you're like trying to keep track of like, well, why are they there? Why it's those arguments like, why doesn't
Yeah.
Ahsoka just show up and like save the day?
Yeah, actually we got a comment about that on our last episode.
Right. So I guess like how it just naturally blends into a new story about the same thing happening.
Yeah.
But we're on to these bigger, larger than life characters. All of a sudden, we're back on the main beat.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I can't wait to meet someone who watched Andor first. And all of
That
Star
should
Wars.
be, honestly, that should be the way to go.
Yeah.
Like Andor, Rogue One, original trilogy.
Yeah.
And then fill in the blanks with everything else.
Yeah, really. If you're saying original trilogy is where you start with Andor, and then go into that, and then you go back for the backstory on the prequels and Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, love it. We talked about this. This can be the last thing, and then we'll wrap up. But we talked about Vader's. We've graduated from Andor and went into Rogue One. Talked about Vader's cameo and Leia's cameo at the end. And we were jokingly speculating about potential cameos in episodes 10, 11, and 12 here of Andor. Were you surprised that we didn't really get any? I mean, we tossed some around of like who we'd like to see and what would make sense, but then at the end of the day, I think we were both like, well, Tony's not really a cameo guy, so I don't really expect one.
I think when you leave episodes 8 and 9, you're like, they can really go somewhere really big with this and make it really kind of out there, right?
Mhm.
More connected like Rogue One is, as it starts to touch the bigger story. And that's where I think I was very pleasantly surprised by the end of 12, or even halfway through all this, where I was like, these episodes are not that. These episodes are very much Andor at their pace, not rushing, not doing anything out of character of the show. Like they are true Andor episodes. And I think I really like that. Because it all just feels so natural. And I'm still blown away by how good episode 12 is. For really nothing happens in 12.
Yeah, that's true. It's just 12 just becomes the runway, right?
We get that wonderful Vel Cassian like drink honoring all the fallen. That was just an awesome moment.
Yeah, they get a conversation with Vel and Clea.
Vel and Clea. Clea is just so good. Like she's obviously the standout, I think, breakout star for like this season. Like she's just such a strong character. Episode 11, like she just shines.
Yeah.
And she's pretty. I think she's pretty burnt out into. You know what I mean? Like she's basically dead too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's the cool thing is like everyone is.
Yeah.
Like this took a toll.
Yeah.
As you know, it would in real life, because what they did was a lot of crazy stuff over several years. But yeah, man, you know, because like 9 ends with Gold Squadron, or well, yeah, I don't know if they actually say that, but that's what Rebels, you know, the connection between Andor and Rebels. But like, you know, I tossed around like, oh, are we gonna see the Ghost crew? Are we gonna see Hera or any of them on the escort of getting Mon to Yavin? And no, we didn't. And I think in my opinion, and I think you share the same opinion, is the lack of cameos was a great thing. There's no need to make this bigger than what it already is. Like, keep it.
I think
contained.
cameos detract from the story you're trying to tell, right? If you're trying to tell a story about the Mandalorian and Grogu, having Luke step in for like to do some stuff, like it doesn't bother Luke at all. Like,
yeah.
So having the cameos would just really detract from the fact that this is a story about Cassian, and how does Cassian get to be this Rogue One Cassian we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I am just more convinced that like we could use a Jin story.
And
you just gotta have a rowdy life. Like Saul picks her up at like what 9 out of the cave, and then it's like you're living with me now, kid.
Yeah, how much Rhydonium do you think he made her do?
I know. Talk about like your crazy uncle. Like Saul shows up. It's like you're going to live with your uncle, kid. It's
Oh
like,
gosh. Oh man.
You want to hit it?
Yeah, but
no,
I think they did such a masterful job though of tying in the Rebels stuff, like leading straight into Rebels things, and then letting I mean, obviously Rebels is an old show, but like letting those episodes now have new meaning and weight behind them. Because that, I forget what it was season 3, but I forget what the episode was, but that literally is a continuation of episode 9. And then there were 2 other episodes in season 4 that you mentioned that fill in that gap of time between 9 and 10, right?
Yep.
And they did such a good job of doing their own thing, telling their own stories, and growing these characters that are shared between, you know, all these different shows and movies and stuff, but not disrespecting the other material, and like paying absolute homage to them by leading almost directly into them, right?
It's just like this. I'll never forget this moment, but like in the Third Age, the video game on Lord of the Rings, right? You play as a completely separate band of characters who are just behind the main events of the story. And when you're in Moria, and the skeleton that they knock over before they fight the troll, you're coming along, and the cutscene is the skeleton falls in front of you.
Oh, that's like,
awesome. Oh, dude, it's nuts. So by having those splices of moments that overlap with Rebels are the right kind of cameos, where we're kind of threading 2 threads, right? I think it's crossover sometimes because they should, because there's characters in this, you know, talking.
And it's great because they didn't like try to redo those moments from the other episode, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool. So what'd you think of season 2?
It was awesome. I mean, it was so good.
Yeah,
so
light 2.
Well, I will rephrase. Probably for me, like the second half of season 2 is like the must watch into Rogue One. Because you got to start with the Gorman Massacre, because it's just a brilliant episode, which then leads into Mon, and like her exit, like Cassian showing up, extracting her, right, and then from there it's just the show's on the road. Yeah, it's good. I love
I
it.
was like, oh no, Nick fell asleep.
No, I was trying to think. I was trying to think more on the threading of stories. But again, those don't detract from the story being told. The same way like Rebels, that's a whole different story being told there, and
Mhm.
that's the thing with like Rogue with Andor, especially in these seasons or these episodes where he's on Yavin. The
Mhm.
whole Yavin base isn't there to like serve Cassian and what Cassian's agenda is.
Right.
So like that's why the idea of like eventually Hera shows up and the ghost, not the ghost crew, but like Hera for the most part, like shows up and is part of the rebellion. But
Mhm.
like she has her own missions and stuff. It just happens that Cassian is like the thread that
Mm.
leads to the Death Star plans and that
Yeah.
kicks all that off. That makes it just all the more mainline thread. And that's what
Mhm.
was so awesome that they were able to achieve and take this paragraph from the opening crawl of A New Hope and and
Yeah.
make 8 movies about it.
It's
9.
everything we wish Rings of Power could have been. And they
Right?
had like
You don't need
a giant like book.
if they knew what they were
Anyway.
doing, like Tony Gilroy should have worked for Amazon and he'd be like, yeah, we just need a paragraph and we'll be straight.
Yeah. Season 2 is
We don't
great.
have to have cameos of all this other stuff. We don't have to
No.
buy all that. We just have to reference it.
Yeah.
In
And I love,
clever ways.
speaking of referenced cameos like Rogue One, Captain Syndulla over the loudspeaker. Love it. And then another scene you hear and see like Chop roll by. He's like,
Yep.
"Pop, pop, pop." I'm like, okay, that's great. That's all I needed.
I just need to know we're in the same place. That's
Yeah.
all I need to know.
Yeah, season 2, great. Season 1, also great. Season 2 we had that little chunk in the first chapter that
Yeah.
Tim said I wish he wasn't like in the middle of crazy storm, so I could have asked him a little more about that because that obviously big stinker. But outside of that, man, great season. Excited that it's over, but also a little sad because that means no more Andor in my life unless I'm rewatching, which probably will someday. With that said, guys, make sure you subscribe. Check out the patreon.com/showboyspodcast. Go check out FSF Popcast. Their link will be in the episode description. And Nick, we got the whole crew's back next week.
I think so, if everyone wants to show up.
Yeah, all hands on deck, which this was supposed to be my message in Discord until I didn't double check my phone's autocorrect and it just looked like I was having a stroke.
Yeah.
Yeah, all hands will be on deck next week. We're gonna is it a what's watching or a what's playing? I know we're splitting them up because it's been a very long time since we've had one of these.
We're doing a what's playing.
Okay, so next week we'll be talking about all the games we've been playing basically since Arcane happened. Which in my case has been kind of a lot of games. But yeah, hopefully Jeff, or Dad, as you guys know him, Dad will be here. Hopefully Chad will be here. Nick and I will be here. And I'll be on the porch because my in-laws will also be here. So
back to our regular scheduled programming.
That's right. And yeah, make sure you come by. Is it going to be streamed too, or?
I think so.
Live
the
stream?
timing all works out like that, yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you there. Make sure you subscribe and like and follow. Give us a review, all that fun stuff. Let us know what you thought about season 2, the series as a whole, and how it tied into Rogue One and A New Hope in the comments. Love to hear from you guys. And until then, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.